happy land of promise over in the great beyond, where the slain of worship sing their glory share, where the souls of me shall enter and live on forevermore. Everybody will be happy over there. Everybody will be happy, will be happy over there. We will shout and sing praise. Everybody will be happy over there. There the ranks of all ages will be singing round.
If you have your book, anybody not have a book? We have several up here if you need one. We're going to be starting lesson 7, which is giving in the Jewish age. Now, I don't mind telling you, when you read Leviticus and you read all of these laws and things that the Jews were bound under the old law, and in our particular topic here, giving, the Jews giving, I'm glad we're not under the old law. It would be really cumbersome. Of course, we're under the new law when Christ died and was risen. We were therefore brought in under a new law. So the aim of this lesson is to show how God required the Jews that we live under a much better law might be encouraged to be generous in our giving. And there again, I'm not saying nobody is. I'm just saying it's part of the topic. If you have your Bibles and you want to turn to Malachi 3, verses 8 through 10. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house. And prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. We need to understand, as we study this morning, giving in the Jewish age, we need to understand that giving is not something that we do out of appreciation. We do, but we do it out of command. God blesses us in many ways. I wanted to share something with you, maybe a little levity. I sit out on the porch sometimes, and I just love little bluebirds. And I've got some houses in various places, and I've got 4 sets of bluebirds that are nesting in those houses. And I just felt like what a blessing from God that I've got that to look at. And they sit and chirp all the time. It's just like they're talking to each other. And then Satan has to step in, saying, I can't let this happen. He's just appreciating this too much. So Satan apparently is inspiring those bluebirds to mess on all of my mirrors and every window on my Explorer. And Kathy came up to me yesterday and said, what are you fixing to do? And I said, well, I don't know why. And she said, don't forget we've got all that bird mess on the car. And I said, all right, I'll go out there after a while. She said, I'm telling you, I'm not going to church tomorrow in that thing with all that bird mess on it. So I wash it all off. And we go to get in the car this morning, and there it is again. And she says, well, you're going to have to do something about this. So I guess I'll have to look up how to keep birds from messing on your car. But anyway, she's funny like that. She's much more of a barker when she's not around y'all. But she's the light of my life, and I put up with a whole lot. And so does she, as you might expect. The three dispensations is the first thing we're going to talk about. The patriarchal was from creation to Sinai, which was 4000 BC to 1491 BC. And the Mosaic or Jewish was from Sinai to Calvary. So all of these laws that the Jews are having to go under, particularly their laws of contribution and giving, were carried on through several thousand years. The Christians, from Pentecost to Christ's second coming, is from AD 33 to present, of course. What's the method of our giving now? As God has prospered us. Now, I want to back up to last week's lesson briefly for one thing. I'm not sure that what I said last week, I'm not sure about that I got how tithing worked. I called Cody yesterday and talked to him for quite a while, and come to find out he was about as unsure of it as I was. We know the 10%, but 10% of what and how often? Well, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. You can research it yourself, but I said that it wasn't, I didn't think, particularly pertaining to their net worth. You own a house, and today's time you own a house, you own a car. If it means trying to give 10%, if that's what your goal is, and you had a really bad year and you didn't make anything, then you would have to sell your car to get some money. Well, now you can't get around. So you see the difficulty that they had also, their animals, their farm animals, their land, their homes. But we'll just leave it with the fact that they were required to tithe 10% as God prospered them. And prospered comes up in the Old Testament as well. So, Section 2, by tithing it is meant the giving or paying of 1/10 of anything as tax or sacrifice. It may be cattle, crops, or other commodities. The tithe was sometimes called the priestly tithe. The first tithe was sometimes called the priestly tithe, and that's in in Leviticus 27 and 30 through 33. All the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is Jehovah's and is holy unto Jehovah. The Jews were to give this title unto the Levites, as they had no inheritance in Canaan. And unto the children of Levi, behold, I have given all the tithe in Israel for an inheritance in return for their service, which they serve, even the service of the tent of meeting. So these priests, these Levites, pretty much have one responsibility, and that's taking care of the religious needs of the people and setting up the tents and all these things that God required Israel to do. They were the priestly tribe. Well, if you're doing all of that, you really don't have a whole lot that you can give, so you're not actually participating in this.
The Lord commanded all the other tribes or all the others to give, basically to give to them and take care
Yes, and then if you flip over to page 34, the Levites were to give 1/10 in turn unto the priest. So even the Levites were had to give. When you take the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them for an inheritance, then ye shall offer up a heave offering of it for the Lord, even a heave offering to Aaron the priest. So that's what you call what the Levites gave to the priest was a heave offering. So even those that didn't earn anything directly, but were blessed by the people giving them sustaining income, that didn't excuse them from being a part of giving. Now I'll tell you, it doesn't really say this necessarily, but that I'm aware of, but I know that giving is as much for us as it is for those that we're giving to. It's a blessing to us to be able to give and give back what we have prospered, as Steve said. I think the key word is prospered. God expects us to remember Him in that way because of so many ties that are related to our giving. You know, from the Bible says that a workman is worthy of his hire. Okay, well, where's that? If you're going to hire him, you're going to take care of him. Where's it coming from? You know, you've got church building purchases, you've got church building expenses and maintenance and salaries and electricity bill, all kinds of utilities. Not to mention missionary and evangelistic work. It depends on how we support what we do, not only here, but in each church of the Lord. I'm going to skip down to number 5. The 10th of the flocks and herds was taken by having them pass under the rod. They passed through a gate large enough for only one at a time to pass, and the priest had a stick which is dipped in red paint, and he put a mark on every 10th sheep as it came out of the gate, and that belonged to the Lord. That's a for sure way to you look out in your flock that's been inventoried. That's a good way to say, well, you know, I'll go get all those with the red mark on it, and we've got to turn those in for food and for sales and stuff to sustain what needed to be done. Number C, we talk about the second tithe. This tithe included an increase of the seed and the tithe of the corn, of thy wine, tithe of thine oil, and firstlings of thy herds and of thy flocks. This tithe was to be eaten by the worshiper, his household, and the Levites at Jerusalem. Now, not everybody is shepherds, and not everybody has sheep. Some people make clothes back then. Some people made bread. They were bakers. Whatever you did, you needed to contribute. In the old law, you needed to contribute 10% as you have been prospered. And part of that was vegetables. Of course, they didn't keep very long, so they had to be used and or sold. Those that had vineyards that made olive oil, never have understood how that can be a one-syllable word. Oil. That sounds like oil. Down south we say all, you know. But you know what? As Southerners, we don't care. We say it that way anyway. The purpose of giving this tithe was that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. The distance to Jerusalem was so far for some they could not take all these commodities with them that far. They could sell it, take the money to Jerusalem, then purchase the necessities for this feast. Quite a while ago, and I had to look it up because I couldn't remember it, but I found this, you know, we're talking about Old Testament tithing and giving, but throughout the course of history, and particularly I'm going to be speaking about modern terms, there are several ways that giving is viewed. And I don't want to make this too important this morning, but I thought it was kind of worth bringing up. There was a post or a note that Ann Landers put in the paper one time, and people were saying they just don't understand all this fascism and Nazism and socialism and all this stuff. And she says, well, let me clear it up for you. She said, in socialism, you have 2 cows. You give one to your neighbor. In communism, you have 2 cows and you give both to the government, and it might give you some of the milk. And in fascism, you have 2 cows, you give all the milk to the government and they sell it. In Nazism, you have 2 cows, the government shoots you and takes both cows. In anarchism, you have 2 cows, you keep both cows, shoot the man from the government, and steal another cow. And in capitalism, you have 2 cows, you sell one and buy a bull. Now this is, I think, a tribute to our country's liberal thinkers. The idea of surrealism. You have 2 giraffes, the government makes you take harmonica lessons. So I just brought that up, you know, concerning people's possessions. I just thought that was kind of funny. The giving of the Jews was very cumbersome. It was but you know what? They respected it, and you remember people making sacrifices that came from long distances to come to Jerusalem, and they brought the best that they had. Now we're going to talk about the 3rd tithe, sometimes called the charity tithe. This was every 3rd year, whereas the first 2 were annual. This was for the Levite because he had no inheritance with them, and the stranger and the fatherless and the widows which are within thy gates. This tithe was to be laid up at home for local charity. Now, I'm going to tell you, and some of our elders in here will tell you the same thing. There are people that will go miles out of their way to show up at the church right when it's getting out, wanting to be given something. Now, I'm not trying to judge them and say they don't have needs, but there are people that don't go a long ways out of their way to try to provide for themselves. But as we get into our giving, we're going to find out that we have to look at that a little bit different.
Terry, I'm going to back up just to number 2, just for the seed, number 4, that distance, just briefly. But that's
Exactly.
Is that requirement? I mean, not a requirement, but they, as they traveled, they didn't bring all their animals. They couldn't bring them all necessarily every time. And so instead of that, they would make purchase of whatever best or firstling of their flocks or whatever it was that they had. They had to purchase that, or they would purchase that same thing and give. But it led to the Jewish leaders allowing those things to be, money to be transacted in the temple, which was contrary to what Christ and what God wanted.
Yeah, it'd become a marketplace. You know, if you need a good dove, or you need a fresh newborn lamb, that's the place to be. This charity tithe, if you'll notice in number 4, the purpose of this was that the Lord may bless thee in all the work of thine hand which thou doest. I don't care what country you go to, I don't care what society you're a part of, you're going to have those that are in need. Now, I was just talking to Karen a few minutes ago. There is one of our prison students that is coming up for parole, and he has a lot better heart than he thinks he does. But right now he's homeless. He does live at the prison, but he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have any income. And he told me that he was planning on, he appreciated us sending him lessons, and when he got out, the first thing he wanted to do was to come here and be with this body of people. Because right up at the top of all our envelopes, Central Church of Christ, you know, then he sends it back, he sends it to Central Church of Christ. So this is kind of, in his mind, this is kind of a hub for what's encouraged him and provided him for all the lessons. And the church here is the ones that provide those lessons. Some of us just send them and grade them. They're pretty easy to grade. But he said he's going to come here. I told him in the letter I sent him yesterday that he wanted to know if we could send him 3 Bibles that he could send to his nieces and nephews. So I thought on that a while, and we're talking about giving. So I told him that they need to take the same courses you've taken. Because if they just up and I said it just like this, if they just up and get a Bible, you know, where are they going to start? Nahum, you know, Malachi, Revelation, you know, they don't have any starting point. The lessons that the church here provides for them is a very specific walk down very specific subjects. And as they answer those, they learn from it. So I offered him that, and I told him, I said, you're talking about $100 worth of Bibles. And I said, we've got a lot of students, and if everybody wanted 2 or 3 Bibles, I said, we couldn't even keep the doors open. But I said, I see it as an opportunity to not only benefit the prisoner and allow him to sow seed, but now we can step outside the prison and and I don't even know if that's part of the process that we're allowed to do. I should have asked. But now you got family members that become involved, and you give him the teacher position, you know, based on what he's learned and all these lessons he's received. And as he gets out, I told him to come here, and I said, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of a wardrobe. And I said, this church is magnificent in how it handles collections of clothes and passes those out to people that are in need. And I said, and you certainly would be in need. And I offered to go to his parole hearing and speak for him, because he has a very big heart, and he sends all his lessons in. He averages missing about 3 per lesson. And it's because he thinks he remembers, and instead of looking, he thinks he remembers and writes the wrong thing down. But these guys are in for a reason. They've done crimes, and they've done things. We've got some that'll never see the light of day. But that doesn't mean that they can't receive the word. So if he comes, I'm going to let everybody know ahead of time, and we need to have about a 20-foot circle of people down here congratulating him for being here, and help mold his life, because apparently he didn't have a whole lot of upbringing, and that's our job. So I'm just letting you know that may happen here shortly. And I can't think of a better group of people for him to start out his church visit than Central. There can be little doubt, either from Scripture or other reliable sources, that there were 3 separate tithes. 2 tithes were levied, one for the Levites, the other to be consumed by the offerer. And the charity tithe, or 3rd tithe, was levied for the poor every 3rd year. There's not a whole lot of thing you can say when somebody tells you they have a need. It's really not up to us to go, I don't think he does. I think he's just pulling her leg. I think he just wants free this or free that. I think you will find as we go on further into our lessons, which are going to be, once we clear out all this about the Jewish tithes and get into modern day Christianity, I think you're going to see if a man asks you to go 1 mile, go 2. And the same thing could be said if he asked you for a meal, give him 2 or give him 3. For the simple reason, and I don't want to underestimate this, for the simple reason, as we just read it in Malachi, that God will open up the floodgates of heaven. And you remember I told you about A.M. Burton telling that graduate student, God's shoveling it in faster than I can shovel it out. And that's true, if we allow it to become truth. We need to have confidence. We need to have confidence in God's word. In section 3, there were other offerings. What was to be done with the gleanings, the fallen fruit, and the harvest left in the corners of the field? Somebody want to answer that? What was to be done with that? Huh? To be left. Leviticus 19:9-10, leave for the poor and stranger. You know, and they do not leave less than a 60th part in the corners. Do you notice how in God's plan for mankind, back even this far, how there was a sense of an evidence of providence? For those that had a lot, give a lot. For those that are poor, you take care of them. Don't spend everything. Save some for this guy. Save some for the stranger. The stranger comes into town, nowhere to go. Give him shelter. Give him food. He can go to the field and pick his own fruit. God has never left, really, that I know of anywhere. God has not left anybody out, especially when it comes to providing for his his people. For whom were the forgotten sheaves and the overlooked olives? And that's in Deuteronomy 24, 19 and 20. For the fatherless, for the widow, and for the stranger. I can't think of anything that is more troubling to a person than maybe a widow. I know a guy, matter of fact, he makes posts on YouTube, and all he does is go around and cut people's yards after he gets off from work, the people that really need it. Now, I'm not suggesting we all go buy a zero-turn lawnmower, but what I'm saying is, he stated on there that he particularly looks for those that are widows, that don't have anybody that can go out and do this work. He cuts shrubs, he cuts down dead trees, the whole thing, and when he gets done, it looks like a show piece, and he doesn't charge them a penny. Now, you think that not only is that going to help them, but that really, really goes a long way in helping him. I mean, the blessing, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Is that right? Now, God didn't say that for just to fill up space in the Bible. There's a reason why he said that. You've ever loaned somebody something that was in need, or you've ever given somebody something that was in need? You can't tell me that when you left you didn't feel fantastic. I feel righteous, more righteous. I feel like I'm doing what God would want me to do. In section C, they were to be punctual in offerings. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy fruits. Now, all of these are Old Testament regulations. But as we go into the Christian age, a lot of these are going to be relaxed. Even to the point in section D, Steve, you want to look up Exodus 22, 29. Even to the point of giving of their children. You can read that.
Exodus chapter 22, verse 29. Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits and of thy liquors, the firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give unto me.
And who's a good example of that? Who? Samuel, is that who you said? I can't hardly hear.
Hannah gave.
Recognize the requirement, recognize the command, and did, and look and did what was told, and she dedicated Samuel to the work of God. And look at what all he did. Sons could be redeemed by a money payment given unto the priest. Okay, on the last page, and I want to try to do one lesson a week from here on out. Okay, what about voluntary offerings at feast? How often should all men appear before the Lord? 3 times a year. For what 3 feasts? Exactly. According to what was every man to give. Huh? As he is able. I heard somebody say something back there, but I didn't catch it in time. The children of Israel were being so led in all that they did, versus today, when you look at like this free will offering, we're given a chance and a choice to do what our heart tells us to do. I don't know anybody, and I don't think you do either, that can say they know somebody that thinks they're giving too much. I don't know, you may be, I don't know. You may think that, but I can't imagine anybody thinking that. If a special vow was made, how was it to be handled? You make a promise, you keep it. You keep that vow. You make a vow, you keep a vow. You don't change your mind. It's a commitment you've made to God. And this was, and we're speaking of the Israelites. God's warning for those slack in paying tithes. How had Israel robbed God? In tithes and offerings. What was the result of this sin? They were cursed with a curse. Yes. Well, I think if you look at taxes today, each person knows they've got to pay taxes, and they have to pay it. When it talks about making a vow, which they did when they made that vow, they had to keep it. God knows if they kept it. God knows if they made it. God knows if it was proper in what they give. God knows if it was 10% or not. And I think they did it because they knew that they had to do it. Does that answer your question? I thought that same thing. Well, look at it from today's standpoint. If you do your taxes and this year, next year, next year, next year, next year, gap, next year, gap, well, guess who's going to come calling? And we know that, and I think they knew that. But as far as the accountability, I think the Levites had their hands full. But probably there was some connection with community leadership. The Jewish leaders had a hand in that, I would think. It's so complicated and so much of it going on, somebody had to help keep up with it. Number C, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith Jehovah of hosts. What does he mean, prove me? Huh? See if what I just told you about, I will open the floodgates of heaven, that you don't have enough to store the blessings. See, test, prove me. see if what I'm telling you is true. And I hope we do that. I hope we recognize the rewards for when we do something. I hope we recognize God's part in what happens from there on. Sometimes we might think it was just coincidental. I know there's this young man I know that he is convinced that he's just rose through the ranks where he works, and he's just convinced that it's all because of him. Well, that's not true. He's a very smart young man, but God's helping him along, and we need to recognize that. When good things happen to us, it's not always us. Yes.
Just on that point, I guess this is my own personal thought, so I won't say scripture or anything like that, but I think there are a lot of times that God proves us or we test God, but God gives us back things. It's not always physical and material. It's spiritual. He can give us things in our lives that are spiritual gifts, blessings, children that are obedient, children that are faithful, help, things like that we, it's not always monetary things that he gives us back, but he does.
That's a good point.
He gives us more than we can receive. And I think to me, it's just the fact that, we're blessed in so many different ways, and we fail to see that a lot of times. It's not, like I said, it's not necessarily the monetary things that we receive blessings from. If you got children that have not had issues with the law or anything else, that's a great blessing, a wonderful blessing. And the Lord has had his hand in that because of your obedience or your faithfulness or whatever it might be. He's helping you.
And I hope I didn't imply material gain, but that's a possibility. If God feels like that's what he wants to do and how he wants to bless you, that's a possibility. But Steve's got a good point that there's all these things, that God can benefit you by. Make your job a little smoother. Make your family be more obedient, and your neighbors, everybody get along. It's just things happen good when we do things that God wants us to do, and giving is one of them. As the bell rung, when do we get out? The first bell or second bell? Second bell. Okay, well then I'll hurry up. Some of the tithes help care for the poor, the widows, and the Levites. These offerings supported the Jewish state, church state, the theocracy, the government by priests or ministers as representatives of God. Offerings were that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God. Well, I'll tell you what, you can, it's fixing to ring here in just a second. Y'all can go ahead and just finish reading that, and we'll get started on Christ's motives for liberality and get in more to modern day studies. So I appreciate everybody being here, and if there's ever anything that I say that you disagree with, then you let me know, because I'm the first one that wants to know it. Hope to see everybody back next week.